Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is still doing well, and welcome to today's bonus upload. Before we jump on into it, a couple quick links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click the like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads that I put out daily, click the bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment and share the video. Why? Well, because all of these things do help the channel to continue to grow and go. They definitely do matter, and they are appreciated. And now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to today's bonus, shall we? Today's first terrifying experience. I live in southern Georgia, near the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge. It's more rural wilderness here than people realize. The Okefenokee is 402,000 acres and home to all kinds of wildlife not seen anywhere else in the world. My uncle is a park ranger and has worked at the Okefenokee for 15 plus years. Back in the early 2000s, park rangers at Okefenokee had a ride-along policy, whereby they could take friends and family out with them for their shift. Often this was done for local officials, wildlife advocates, etc., but some rangers would randomly take family members as well, just for fun. I'm not sure this was formally approved, but I know my uncle had taken just about every one of our family members at some point in the time. The event I'm about ready to share with you happened in April of 2007 while on a ride-along with my uncle. I was 20 at the time and had just gotten back from college for the summer. My family was on an extended vacay already, and I had about a week before I was to join them. I had asked my uncle if he wanted to go fishing, and he suggested to come with him on a ride-along instead, just for the fun of it. At the time the Bugaboo Fire had started, we weren't too close to it. Most of the park's resources were dedicated to the fire by this point. But my uncle and I were definitely not near it. I had met my uncle at the Bolt Center after dinner sometime, and we had gotten on an airboat. The other ranger who was supposed to come with us was called to fire-related issues. I remember this because that was actually the first time I had learned of the fire, listening to him talk about it on the phone. Then my uncle filling me in. So we head out, just the two of us. I don't know for sure, but because we met at the Bolt Center, I assume we started west down the waterway. I don't know where we went other than this, as it was getting dark and I had no idea really even where we were, and I really didn't much care. About 30 minutes in, we found two kayakers night fishing, which was not allowed at night. Before we got up close to them, my uncle said they were regulars here. He was supposed to accompany them back, but he said he was confident they'd be fine going back on their own. We stopped next to them, and they started talking. They were breaking the rules, but obviously they were friends with my uncle. They said they had seen more gators in the water than ever before. My uncle had mentioned this on our ride, as we had seen dozens. But he didn't say much about that. But these guys insisted it was unlike anything they had ever seen. He said literally thousands, plus lots of other wildlife close to the shore. My uncle blamed the fire, and they agreed. It was spooking the wildlife and driving them to the waterways. These guys insisted we follow them up a few hundred yards to the fork in the creek, and we did. I kid you not, more than 1,000 alligators in a tiny little area, packed like sardines. It was something to see. It was just about dark outside, but the airboat had a massive light on the front, and it was just amazing. They were almost layered up on 2 levels. That's how crowded the water was. What amazed me most was how close the kayakers were willing to get to these gators. Anyway, we sat there a couple minutes. My uncle was fiddling with his camera to photograph the event. Lots of bellowing and small fights here and there. The gators weren't huge. They don't get that big in South Georgia. Not like South Florida, but the night was awesome. Then, after maybe 2 minutes of looking, mayhem broke out. We hadn't moved at all in the 2 minutes, and the gators didn't seem to mind us much. But something spooked them, and for a solid 30 seconds the water was just insane with gators flopping all over the place, scrambling under the water in every direction. The kayakers bolted immediately as the gators were hitting their boats. My uncle seemed unaffected, but was photographing everything. That's when I saw what was the strangest animal I had ever seen in my life. I say animal only because this was definitely no person, and it's hard to even explain. It was like part bear, part primate. I only had peripheral light from the airboat to see this thing, so I really couldn't make it out too well. I say bear because of the black sheen on the coat, but I later wondered if that might have been because the coat was wet. It was thick fur either way. Primate because of how it moved and turned its roundish head, though it was walking on all fours. I could barely see its eyes. I only knew there were eyes because of the reflections in the dark. This thing was big, the size of a large bear, thinner and more wiry. The angle of its limbs were just downright creepy, and its dexterity, moving slowly along the shoreline, gave me the goosebumps. It almost moved like a spider, using, like I said, all fours, but not like a horse would, like a spider, which I know sounds strange. But that's the only way I can describe this thing. It was right up to the edge of the creek looking at us. I didn't think to see if the gators were swimming away from this spot, but it was just mayhem in the waterways anyway. I pointed and yelled something unintelligible, but he kept photographing the gators. I didn't even know what words to say. I think I just said WTF. My uncle wouldn't have known I was talking about anything other than the gators, so he never even looked up. I looked back at him to try to get his attention, but looked right into the boat's crazy powerful light. When I did that, then I couldn't see anything again. When I looked back at the shore, by the time my eyes had adjusted, maybe 60 seconds later, the creature was gone. No photos, no other witnesses to the creature. I started to tell my uncle what I had seen, but I felt like an idiot when he gave me this very suspicious look. I know almost nothing about the outdoors to begin with, so I just shut my mouth. But somewhere there are photos of the gators, to at least prove this. I've seen those because I saw my uncle showing them to my dad a few weeks later. Anyway, I was on edge much of the rest of the night. My uncle dropped me back off at around midnight. He kept working. I went home. I literally had goosebumps the whole drive back, feeling like I had seen that thing on my drive. I've done some research into skunk ape and such, just so little evidence of this. I don't know what I saw that night, but it was something. One question that's boggled me was why so many gators. I actually wondered if this thing was feeding them. I've only ever seen this many gators piled up at a gator park during feeding time. I really believe this creature was feeding these gators. Then, when it moved a certain way or somehow our boat got too close, they got spooked. But nothing else explains this except maybe the fire several miles away, though the fire was, to my memory, not a big deal at this time yet. Today's second terrifying experience. I'd been living in Brabant, the Netherlands, for a while, a few kilometers before the border of Belgium. A few weeks ago, I went on holiday to Wichelen, Belgium. A few family members of mine live there, so I stayed overnight. I'm very fond of walking, and I do that every day. I went for a walk on a Tuesday evening. After having walked for about a half an hour, I walked over this bridge. It was very quiet, almost unusual. This I found not really strange, but just giving me peace. I stopped just at the edge of the bridge to get some water from my backpack. At that moment, I heard something that sounded like iron coming against something. Something like an iron chain. I heard it very softly the first time and thought it was coming from afar, so I thought nothing special. After a few seconds, I heard it a second time. And this time it sounded very close, so I wondered what it was. There was nobody around me as far as I knew. I didn't worry, but it was strange. I think then I thought it was a homeless person or something under the bridge. It was about 1 p.m. I heard the same weird sound under the bridge. I decided to keep listening until I heard some sort of howling. I remember falling back because I was shocked. It was weird whine, what you'd expect from a dog or a wolf. It sounded very heavy but dull. I was shocked because I could not identify the sound. I actually stopped because I was petrified. It was a different feeling. So much fear that you will remain standing. After that moment, I looked down. I saw a kind of dog-like creature that was walking on 2 legs. It was huge, so I knew it was not a dog. It was black and had some kind of small wings on its back. And it had a kind of chain on its leg. If I can remember correctly, on its left leg. I think there was water under the bridge because it was wet. At a moment, it turned around and looked into my eyes. They were dark. The creature's head looked a bit like a large wolf, and at that moment I knew I had to run. I stumbled a few times and sprained my ankle. I've never seen anything like this. I only told one other person who lived in the neighborhood, and he said he knew what I had seen. He had mentioned a name, but I can't think of it anymore. I thought about sharing this for a long time because I still have nightmares about it. Today's third terrifying experience. My friend is half Creek Indian. His father's full blood, and his mom is of Irish descent. His family lived on a farm way out in Osage County. His father owned some land back in West Garfield County, but the ground was not producing wheat very well, so they leased the place out in Osage to run cattle on. They had a quarter section of open meadow that they used for their feed, and a quarter section of densely wooded land. The wooded area almost surrounded the open area. Before daylight, one October morning, my friend woke up with a start to his father's voice telling him to get up immediately and get dressed. He reluctantly obeyed and walked into the kitchen where his father already had a carbide light lit and was waiting at the door. His father shoved the light in my friend's hand, at the same time handing him a 30-30. Something is running the cattle. His father had a lantern and a 30-06. This was in the early 50s, before flashlights were commonplace. Walking at a brisk pace, they headed in the direction the cattle were moving away from. They crossed the fence and walked on the outside in case the cattle were flushed toward them. They were getting ready to round a corner of fencing when something had caught their eye, a tuft of reddish-brown fur, on the top strand of a 5-strand barbed wire fence. As they approached, they could barely see some blood on the ground on both sides of the fence. They were preparing to head into the edge when they heard a heavy thud. 10 yards in front of them, the remains of a calf lay on the ground. His dad detected movement behind a tree, raised his rifle, and fired. Something large and brown stood on 2 legs and ran off through the brush toward the back of the property. They listened to it until it was no longer audible. His father put out his lantern. They almost ran back to the house. At daybreak, his mother was sent into town and told to stay there with a friend until they came for her. Just before nightfall, they both climbed a big oak. About 30 yards from the house, they waited. Sure enough, about an hour after dark, something started moving in. They could hear it walking in behind them. Every now and again, they could hear it stop and sort of snort, like it was smelling the air. The night had become overcast, and a little breeze had kicked up. They waited. Soon they could make out a dark figure breaking the tree line about 25 yards away. It stopped, raised up on two legs, and sniffed the air. It was barely visible in the inky blackness. His dad had given him a specific instruction not to shoot anything until they knew what they were shooting at. This creature approached the house and peered into one of the windows. After a moment, it dropped down onto all fours and moved over to the next window, where it stood up on its hind legs and peered in again. This time my friend caught a good look at the silhouette against the window. It was 6 to 7 foot, wider than the 24-inch windows. It virtually had no neck, more like a large bump between its shoulders. It had dark brown fur like a cinnamon black bear. My friend raised his rifle. His father pushed the gun down slowly and solemnly shook his head. After what seemed like forever, the creature moved back into the woods. They waited until dawn to climb down. His father told him of a wood spirit that would come and carry off children from the tribe at night. His father believed this was one of them. They packed their few belongings, hitched the horses, and drove a few of their cattle away. My friend never saw the farm again. Many years later, his father explained that the creature had been seen was very smart, violent, and terrible. His father couldn't remember what it was called in Creek, though. My friend told me that to this day he will never forget his father's words. "My son, never ever shoot at that creature. It will kill you." Every time I remember this story, I still get goosebumps. I decided to do a little internet research and found a Creek legend about a man-eating, hairy, gorilla-like creature called the Kolowa. Today's fourth terrifying experience. This experience is burned into my memory, and I will never forget it, even the small details. I'll share it with you exactly how it happened. I grew up in the high deserts and mountains of southeast Idaho. Most of my life was spent outdoors, whether I was on the back of a horse pushing cattle for local ranchers or hunting elk, or on foot hunting rabbit and deer through the sagebrush. I was given my first .22 rifle when I was 9 years old and spent every minute I could out in the lava flows hunting rabbit, rock chuck, and sage hen. I remember several times that my mother and father would drop me and my best friend off somewhere along the lava and pick us up at the same spot 3 or 4 days later after many miles of exploring and living off the land. All we would take is some water, shells, and a knife. When I got older, and we had our own vehicles, my trips got a lot longer and a lot further into the desert. As I write this down, I can still smell the sagebrush and feel the desert sun on my face. I love that Idaho desert more than any place on this earth. I feel more comfortable out in the desert 30 miles from the closest person than I do in my own living room. During the summer of 2001, I was south and slightly east of the big southern butte. I had spent a couple of days looking for arrowhead. Everything had been pretty normal. I walked for miles and found a few arrowhead, a few dead coyote and deer, pretty normal. At this time in my life, I always had my dog with me. He was a huge Chesapeake retriever that weighed a little over 100 pounds, very protective of me and my belongings, and was meaner than he to anybody who acted suspicious or threatening. His surly demeanor towards anybody who messed with me or my stuff earned him his name Kane with my family and friends. The name stuck. Kane loved to go anywhere I went. He loved to go out to the desert and run around, never getting too far away from me. I always felt very secure with him around because he had proved time and time again that he was aware of every living thing that approached us out in that desert, and if that thing was dangerous, whether human or animal, he held no qualms about tearing right into the middle of them. In fact, he enjoyed it. Anyway, we made our way back to the pickup truck an hour or so before it got dark. I gathered up some juniper branches and sagebrush to make a fire. I cooked up some dinner for my dog and myself and settled into a hammock for the night. There's nothing better than sleeping in a hammock while outdoors. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of trees in the desert, so I would find a juniper or a fence post and park my pickup close to it and tie one end of the hammock to the pickup bed and the other to the fence post or tree. I spent many comfortable nights rigged up like this. This night was no different. I climbed into my hammock and was soon fast asleep. A couple of hours later, I woke up to raindrops. It had started raining pretty hard, and I was getting pretty wet. I quickly threw all of my gear into my hammock, untied it from the fence post, rolled it up with everything inside, and tossed it into the back of my truck with a tarp over it to keep it dry. With all my gear safely stowed, Kane and I crawled into the cab of the pickup and settled in for a dry, if cramped, rest of the night. At around 3 in the morning, a strange sound woke me up. I was reclined back as best as I could in the driver's seat, and Kane was sitting up, alert on the passenger side. He was growling very softly, and the hair and his shoulders and neck were standing straight up, a very menacing and intimidating sight. I was glad he was on my side. He was looking over my shoulder out the driver's side window. It was a quiet growling that had woke me up. I didn't move, but just opened my eyes and looked around by moving my eyes in their sockets. It had stopped raining and the clouds had gone away. The sky was now clear with a bright, almost full moon overhead. It was bright enough that I could see Kane very clearly. I wondered what he was focusing on. I just lifted my hand in front of his nose. I really don't know why I did that, but that's what I did. I never even really looked at me, but he moved his head to the side so he could continue to watch what was outside of my driver's side window, continuing his quiet, threatening growl. I'd never seen Kane so focused on anything the way he was now. It sent a shot of adrenaline through me. I was immediately awake now. This gave me goosebumps, and the hair on my arms and neck were standing straight up. I was scared to turn my head and look out the window. I wasn't sure that I wanted to see what was outside. I slowly summoned the courage and turned my head to the left and looked out my window. About 50 yards away, slightly behind the truck and moving its way closer towards me, was this large, dark figure. In the bright moonlight, I could see that this thing was covered in long, coarse fur. It was walking on its hind legs, moving like a man, but different. Its arms seemed longer, and they were kind of swaying as it walked. The moon shone through the hair around the outside of the body, and the dark, solid shape underneath was visible. It was moving in slow steps towards me. Every step, it would stop, crouch down, wait a few seconds before moving ahead a couple more steps, exactly as my dad taught me to do while stalking deer and elk. I have no idea if this creature meant to do me any harm, but seeing it move exactly as I did when putting the stalk on deer with me as a target of its attention did not make me feel warm and fuzzy inside. My mind on overdrive. Imagine my reality of what exists and doesn't exist in this world was suddenly, and without much fanfare, turned upside down. At the same time, for the first time in my life, it would happen many more times in the near future, in a crappy place called Iraq. Genetically inherited, but deeply buried alarm bells were screaming inside of my head. My subconscious recognized the danger and demanded that I do something while at the same time dumping bucket loads of adrenaline into my system. My thoughts jumped immediately to my pistol, and at the same instant I remembered that it was rolled up in the back of my truck in the hammock under a tarp, completely useless. Not that my pistol would do any good. As this thing got closer, I could see that it was big, probably 7-8 feet tall and solid. It moved like an animal that is very heavily built, but is quick and fast at the same time, like a tiger. Kane had gone from sitting to standing on the seat. His hair was standing straight up, and his quiet growl had turned into a savage snarl. What a dog! Here's this monster outside of my truck, and my dog is ready for me to open the door and turn him loose. My mind quickly switched from fight mode into flight mode. My keys were in the ignition. Without taking my eyes off of this thing, I reached up and started the truck. The creature was less than 30 yards away now. When it heard the engine start up, it crouched down lower to the ground than it had crouched before. The top of its pointed head was just above the level of patch of sagebrush that happened to be between me and it. My pickup was nosed up to a lava rock wall. The only trail out was to my right and behind. There was large lava rocks scattered on the ground, so I had to make an over 180-degree turn while backing up and be lined up with the road. I threw the truck in reverse and floored it, turning on my lights at the same time. As I swung through the turn, my high beam swung right across this creature. It put its head down, probably to protect itself from the glare, and all I saw was the top of its head. I noticed a mass of coarse, dark gray fur before its shape was swallowed by the darkness. I drove down that 2-track desert road way faster than I normally would. My truck was bouncing over rocks and plowing over sagebrush. When the curves were too sharp to take at that speed, Kane and I were bouncing all over the inside. I drove that way for several miles, continuously looking behind me until I calmed down enough to slow down. I drove out to the main road and stopped to mentally go over what I had just seen. But stopping out there in the dark was too much. I ended up cutting my trip short and just went home. Tonight's final encounter. I'm not a big believer in the paranormal or supernatural, but I've always been open to the idea of such, given some type of evidence. About a couple nights ago, I saw something that I still cannot fully understand or explain. A little backstory. I live in mid-Michigan in a small residential suburban town surrounded by cornfields. You know the type. However, I do live in a more populated area, as my parents' house, where I currently live, is located within walking distance from our downtown. Our street is by no means desolate, dark, or isolated, and most of the houses are fairly close to one another. A pretty urban setting, given the town itself. All right, back to the other night. It was about 2:30 in the morning, and since it's pretty normal for me to be up that late, my dog and I have developed what I call our little routine. He comes to my door, lets out this huff to inform me that he's there. Then we go downstairs, where I let him outside through the front door to go to the bathroom. After completing his business, he comes in and we share a midnight snack of ham straight from the fridge. Now, keep in mind, my dog is extremely well trained and pretty old. He does not need a leash or a fence to keep him from running away. He always comes right back after he's done. He'll even wait at the door if you are not there. So on this particular night, I open the front door for him, and I'm just about to turn and walk away so I can prepare our midnight snack when I notice he's still standing on the porch staring across the street. This isn't completely out of the norm for him, but this was lasting a bit longer than usual. When he finally jumps off the porch, I follow his line of sight where he had been staring, and I see what looks like a large dog, or maybe even a wolf, slinking across my neighbor's yard on the other side of the street. For the first few seconds, I'm trying to figure out what WTF this thing is, because it looks like it could be a dog, but something's not right. It's too long, and the way it's moving is not normal. And even though it's about 50 feet away, still kind of looked like it was blurry. I can't think of any other way of describing it. None of this makes sense. At this point, I go into panic mode because so far this creature has not seemed to notice me or my dog, but if it does, my dog does not stand a chance, and like I said, he's old and also a Pomeranian. Whatever this thing is would easily destroy him with no doubt. I decide to slowly open the outer glass door, hoping to create just enough noise to alert my dog that it's a good time for him to come in, but not far enough for whatever that thing is to hear me. Luckily, my dog notices right away and starts running back towards me, but at the same time, this dog creature starts turning towards me slowly. It almost felt fake how unnatural it moved, like animatronics or something else. I'm not even sure what I'm looking at, but I have this indescribable feeling that I am not supposed to be seeing this creature. So, as this thing is turning to look at me, my dog is coming through the door simultaneously, and for about a second, I take my eyes off this creature to look down at my dog to close the door. When I look back up, this thing has moved about 30 feet to the left into my neighbor's driveway rather than your yard and is standing on its hind legs at about 7 to 8 feet tall staring at me. Now I'm freaking out. How did it move so quickly and without making a single sound? And how is this thing so tall and literally it's standing on its hind legs? I look away again to lock the door and gather myself, only to look again and see absolutely nothing. It's gone. The whole ordeal lasted 30 seconds total, if that. Shaking, I give my dog his hand and mine, and I run downstairs to my brother's room in the basement to tell him what had just happened. Being the normal 19-year-old playing video games, his response was, "Wow, WTF, that's super weird." But honestly, I just needed to tell someone to confirm what had just happened actually happened, and that I wouldn't wake up the next day and convince myself it was a dream. Over the last few days, I've told anyone who would listen to me about what I saw, including my parents. Those who are closer to me seemed to be a bit more unnerved because, like I mentioned earlier, I don't usually believe in this type of thing. They could tell I was shaken by whatever it was that I saw. So, after some random Googling, as a result of my restless mind, I came across what appears to be an exact description of what I saw, a Dogman. I had never heard anything about this creature before, but I am now fully convinced I saw one in front of me with my own eyes, and it saw me as well. All right, folks, there you have it. I hope you all enjoyed tonight's bonus as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you for supporting the channel. It is, after all, your support that helps the channel to continue to grow and go, and what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone is simply treated with the respect that we deserve. Stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant. Keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and friends. These creatures are real. These events have happened. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless you all.